Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're plugging into a company that's really working on a critical part of the EV revolution, charging. But maybe not the part everyone talks about.
That's right. We're looking at Beam Global. NASDAQ ticker is BEAM.
And the big question we're digging into is, how is Beam Global actually solving these EV infrastructure challenges? Especially, where getting power from the grid is tough or maybe just not possible.
Yeah, and for this deep dive, we're mostly drawing on Beam's recent Q1 2025 order update that came out May 8th. We also have some insights from Analytica Investor.
Okay.
So the goal here is to give you a really solid grasp of Beam's tech, their financials lately, where they sit in the market, and what the future might hold for them. Some are calling them an overlooked infrastructure innovator, and maybe rightly so.
Right. Okay, let's get into it. I mean, EVs are everywhere, right? Tesla's always making news.
Constantly.
But as more EVs get on the road, there's this growing feeling, isn't there, that we might hit a snag, actually charging all these cars.
Absolutely. The adoption rate, how fast people are buying EVs, it's outpacing how quickly we can build out the charging infrastructure. And it's interesting, Deloitte's 2024 data shows, huge growth in solar capacity, up 88% in the US, and battery storage jumped 64%.
That's massive.
Huge. But the grid itself, the wires and substations needed to move all that power around. It often struggles to keep up with that kind of new demand.
Exactly. It's like, yeah, you've got all this clean power potential, but the pipes aren't quite ready. And that's where Beam Global fits in, right?
Yeah.
They're not just pointing out the problem. They seem to have a specific workaround. Off-grid charging.
That's their niche. They're tackling what some call the infrastructure bottleneck no one's talking about.
So tell us about their main product, the EV ARC.
Right, the EV ARC. So picture this, a completely self-sufficient EV charging station. It uses its own solar panels, captures sunlight, stores the energy in its own battery right there on board, and then uses that stored energy to charge EVs, all without ever needing to connect to the utility grid.
So no digging trenches, no waiting for permits for grid hookups.
Exactly. That's the key benefit. Deployment is incredibly fast. We're talking hours, literally hours, to set one up. Not the months or sometimes even years it can take for traditional grid-tied chargers.
Yeah.
It just leapfrogs those hurdles.
That does sound like a game changer, and it seems like the market's catching on. You mentioned that Q1 order surge announcement, a 23% jump quarter over quarter.
Yeah, a very healthy jump. It definitely signals that more customers are seeing the value in this off-grid approach.
Okay.
But to really get the full picture, we should look at their 2024 financials. They culled in $49.3 million in revenue,
Right.
which was a 124% increase from 2022. Now, they specifically compare it to 22, kind of skipping over 23.
Why is that?
Well, 2023 had some unusually large one-off federal contracts, so comparing to 22 probably gives a clearer view of the underlying growth in their, let's say, core or recurring business lines.
Gotcha. So smoothing out the bumps. And part of that underlying growth must be commercial customers, right? I saw a figure like 229% growth there.
Exactly, a massive jump. And that really points to a strategic shift, Less reliance perhaps on those big, sometimes unpredictable government deals, and more focus on building a broader commercial base.
Which probably means more predictable revenue going forward.
That's likely the strategy. And it gets better when you look at profitability. Gross margin overall hit 15% in 2024. That's way up from just 2% the year before.
Wow.
And if you look at it non-GAAP, which sort of strips out some accounting items to show core operational performance, the gross margin was even stronger at 21%.
Those are definitely steps in the right direction. And profitability is one thing, but cash flow is another, right? How did they do there?
Huge improvement there, too. They slashed the cash they used in operations by 83%.
83%.
Yeah. It went from about $13.3 million used in 23 down to just $2.2 million used in 24. Plus, they ended the year with zero debt.
Nice.
$4.6 million in cash and access to a $100 million credit line they haven't even touched. So financially, they look pretty solid.
And they're not just coasting. There's a backlog, right? Orders already in hand.
Yep, a $5.6 million order backlog as of their last report. That signals more revenue coming down the pipe.
Okay.
Combine that backlog with their efforts to trim costs. And Beam looks like it's set up pretty well for potentially better margins and maybe even hitting positive cash flow in 2025.
So 2024 wasn't just about sales and financials. It sounds like they were busy innovating too, developing new stuff.
Oh, absolutely. They called 2024 their most innovative year yet. Lots of new products launched, especially towards the end of the year in Q4.
Really?
Yeah, they said they launched more new products just in that one quarter than in the entire previous decade.
Wow. Okay, so what are we talking about? What kind of new things?
Well, a big one is the Beam Spot.
Yeah.
It's a bit more flexible than the EV ARC.
Mm-hmm.
It can use solar like the ARC, but also potentially integrate wind power or even connect to the grid if needed. Plus, it has lighting built in.
So more applications, like
Mhm.
city curbsides or airports.
Exactly. Curbside charging, airports, public spaces, that kind of thing. But they also launched other specialized products. Beam Bike for micromobility, like e-bikes.
Yeah.
Beamwell, aimed at healthcare powering mobile medical gear, maybe. And Beam Patrol for law enforcement applications. Think powering equipment in the field, that sort of thing. Clean power for specific needs.
And are these new products getting any traction yet? Any big contracts?
Seems like it. They landed a pretty big $7.4 million deal with the U.S. Army.
Okay.
And another one, $4.8 million from Homeland Security. And it's not just domestic. Their military sales are going international. They're deploying units for the UK Ministry of Defense over in Cyprus.
Expanding their reach then.
Definitely. They're pushing into the Middle East and Africa too, working through reseller partners there. And they've teamed up with electric motorcycle companies like Zero Motorcycles and Benzina Zero.
It really sounds like a global push.
Mm.
And didn't they acquire a company in Serbia? Telkom. How does that fit in?
Right, Telkom. That was a really strategic move, it seems. It boosts their in-house manufacturing, especially for the power electronics.
The brains of the system, basically.
Exactly. Think of it like the engine. Bringing that production in-house means they can likely cut costs, have tighter control over quality, and innovate faster on those core components instead of relying on outside suppliers. Should help them scale up more efficiently.
Okay, so stepping back, how big is this market they're playing in? Is this a niche or is the potential really large?
Oh, it's potentially huge. Some estimates put the market needing this kind of off-grid innovation at around $100 billion.
Wow.
Yeah, and remember those projections we talked about, Deloitte, PwC? They're saying tens of millions of charging points needed just in the US by 2030.
Right.
And the key thing is a lot of those chargers will need to go in places where connecting to the grid is just too expensive, takes way too long, or isn't even an option. That's the sweet spot.
And that's Beam's main selling point, their differentiator. They just bypass all that grid stuff.
That's their core advantage. Clean, reliable charging, independent of the grid. And they're protecting that advantage, too. They've been building up their intellectual property.
Patents.
Yep. They've got a European patent related to battery thermal safety, keeping batteries safe in different temperatures.
Important.
Very. And U.S. patents for things like wireless EV charging using renewable power sources, and another for tech related to assembling batteries efficiently at high volume.
That sounds like you could create, a bit of a moat around their business, keep competitors out, and maybe open up other ways to make money, like licensing.
That's definitely the potential. These patents give them market defensibility and, yes, potentially new revenue streams down the road, especially as they expand globally. It makes their technology harder to copy directly.
Makes sense. They seem serious about that global expansion, too, bringing in new executives and partners in different regions.
They do. It looks like a very deliberate strategy to capitalize on these advantages worldwide.
Okay, so looking forward then, what should people watching this space, or maybe potential investors, keep an eye on? Their next earnings report is coming up soon, right? May 26th.
Yeah, Q1 2025 earnings on May 26th. That'll be a key moment. We'll want to see if that order momentum from the last announcement continued.
Right.
And are those profit margins still improving? How's the rollout of the new Beam Spot going? Any updates on those military contracts or new international deals? Those are all potential catalysts.
It's interesting, though, with all this seemingly positive stuff happening, the stock price is, well, near its 52-week low, around $1.48 last I checked.
Yeah, it's definitely seen higher levels. It was up around $7.68 in the past year. So at current prices, the valuation is roughly 0.9 times its trailing 12 months of sales.
Which is low compared to others in the sector.
Generally, yes. You often see clean tech or EV infrastructure companies trading at, say, 4, 5, even 6 times revenue. So 0.9 times, especially for a company with no debt and clear growth prospects in a booming market. Well, it suggests it might look attractive from a valuation standpoint, particularly for those with a longer-term view.
So the big picture here isn't just selling charging units one by one. It sounds like Beam sees itself as something more fundamental.
I think so. By providing power where the grid can't easily reach or isn't reliable, they're basically enabling EV adoption itself, but also enabling things like microtransit, e-bikes, scooters,
Yeah.
and just making energy more resilient overall.
So it's moving beyond just being a product company.
Yeah, potentially evolving into more of an infrastructure platform, a key piece of the future for clean energy and transport. It's kind of a different way of thinking about fueling transportation, isn't it? Moving away from that total reliance on the centralized grid.
Definitely. So if we were to boil it down, what are the main takeaways on Beam Global?
I'd say the key thing is they have a unique, innovative solution, off-grid charging, that directly solves a major pain point in the EV transition.
Right, the infrastructure bottleneck.
Exactly. And they're backing that up with improving financials, a stream of new products for different uses, and a clear push into global markets. They seem to be tackling a real need in a huge market and doing it from a pretty solid financial base now.
And doing it in a way that maybe flies a bit under the radar compared to the big car companies, but it's arguably just as critical for the whole ecosystem.
Precisely. They could be a really significant, though maybe less visible, player in actually building out the infrastructure we need for clean mobility.
Okay, so here's something to leave you with. Thinking about how difficult, slow, and expensive it can be to upgrade our traditional power grids. How much could these kinds of off-grid solutions like beams truly change the game? Could they fundamentally reshape how we think about getting energy for transportation in the coming years? Something to mull over?
Definitely worth watching.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today. We encourage you to look more into being global and these broader shifts happening in clean energy infrastructure.